I have very exciting news. The Trans Rights Readathon is coming up at the end of March. The dates have officially been released. And in case you're ready to start building your Trans Rights Readathon TBR, here are some recommendations that I have read and loved or are on my Trans Rights Readathon TBR for this year. And in case you're wondering, why do we do this? It is because the trans books are not typically uplifted in the publishing industry, and with the new Trump administration, I frankly think that those books will be harder and harder to find as new releases. So by indicating to publishers that these are books that we want to read, stories that we want to hear, and by helping trans authors by uplifting their books, particularly during this week and hopefully throughout the entire year, we hope to really make these voices amplified. As a person who is cisgender myself, I cannot speak to the trans experience in any way, but these stories have really made me think, have made me more understanding, and I feel like you will enjoy as well. The first one is a recent read for me, so I have to put it at the top of the list, but if you are looking for like a smutty, polyamorous trans story, you should start with The Companion by E.E. Ottoman. This was a fun read. It's also very short, so you can like take off a book right at the start of your list. Let's jump into stuff that is a little bit more nonfiction based, and then I have more fun things for you. If you have not yet read Fierce Femmes and Notorious Liars, it is one of the most interesting memoirs I have ever read because it also incorporates fiction in some ways and like imagination. But this is a really, really great book to read as an audiobook, and if you read it, let me know because I want to chat about some of the things in it as well. If you want to hear more like essays or voices of trans people, Transmogrify is also a phenomenal read. I read it last year and I'm really grateful that I was able to read that. Kind of on like a similar note of like incorporating a little bit of magic, this year I am hoping to read The Transgalactic Bike Ride. I had it on my list last year. The wait list was like almost a year long, so I'm coming up on it and I can't wait to check it out. If you are looking for either like YA or graphic novels, some of those options might be Love and Pom-Poms, which is I think graphic novel about a cheerleader who is a trans woman. This one is on my list for 2025's Trans Rights Readathon. I've got to hold on it at the library and I can't wait to know more. If you are looking for a middle grades book, maybe to read with a teenager in your life, Dear Mothman is one of the most profound and beautiful things I've ever read. It's a story told in poems and images about a trans boy who has experienced grief over the death of another trans boy in his class. And his way to cope is to write letters to Mothman because he sees Mothman as being the only other being who knows how out of place he feels. Grab some tissues for this one, but it's totally worth it. Another YA read is Pet by Okweke Emezi. Anything by Okweke Emezi is going to be a great option. Many of their books are adult, so just check and make sure if you're reading it with a young person. But Pet is set in a utopian society where no monsters or bad things happen until one comes through our main character's painting. This story has some pretty heavy topics, so if you're reading it with young people, make sure that you're discussing that with them in an appropriate way. But it's really a beautiful story. A great YA book for Trans Rights Readathon is Felix Ever After. This is the story of a trans teenager in an art program who is experiencing a little bit of transphobia, and we watch them navigate that with their closest friend. If you can handle some pretty gory violence, Andrew Joseph White's books are all phenomenal. All three of these are 5-star reads for me, but I would recommend for this year, if you can handle some violence, reading Compound Fracture. It is set in West Virginia, in Appalachia, in a coal mining town where our trans main character is being targeted by the sheriff's family. I also last year read The Deep by Rivers Solomon in collaboration with a few other people. The audiobook of this is narrated by David Diggs, so if that is not enough to sell you, I don't know what to tell you, but this is the story of women during the slave trade who were thrown overboard and became mermaids. It is such a fascinating story and a really interesting exploration. It's also a novella. Another shorter read that my friend Kelsey just recommended to me that I already have checked out on Libby is The Woods All Black, and it is about a trans person who is traveling through, I believe, Appalachia to administer vaccines. So stay tuned, that'll probably be in a monthly wrap-up shortly. One of the other books that's on my TBR for this Trans Rights Readathon is Manhunt. The only thing I know is that people are trying to collect, I don't know if I can say this on YouTube, the things on the cover. I don't know. I'm excited to read it and to find out what it's all about. I just requested that from my library as well. If you haven't read Aidan Thomas's books, The Cemetery Boys, The Sunbearer Trials, or its sequel, The Celestial Monsters, if you are looking for something like high action with a really lovable main character, these are going to be perfect. They incorporate a lot of fantasy and they're really, really fun reads. And if you're looking for something like high fantasy, epic fantasy, Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse features an agender main character and it's beyond exceptional. It is a 3-book series, so it has, lots to dig into once you find out how much you love it. And the last recommendation I have for you is a modern contemporary story with some magical realism, and that is The In-Between Bookstore. I read this in December as an audiobook. I was also sent an early copy, and this is a story of a trans man who decides to leave New York City, go back to the small town he was raised in, and help his mom move. Meanwhile, he finds that the bookstore he used to work at has now become like a time warp, and every time he goes back in, he meets his younger self pre-transition. It also incorporates a lot of queer people who are thriving in community in a small town, which to me was an absolute delight to read. I will probably post again closer to March with my official TBR for Trans Rights Readathon for this year, but here are some recommendations to get you started, and if you're looking for recommendations in a specific genre, let me know and I will find them for you.